boundaries are love. Boundaries are meant to keep people in, not out. Those are walls. And that's how you know the difference. And boundaries are on a continuum of thin to thick. So really thin boundaries are when people, share their whole lives with you, where there's a lot of enmeshment, a lot of codependency, things like that. And on the other end are when people are too nice and people pleasing and all that, right? That's all on that one end. And then on the other end, boundaries that are too thick are when, we cut people off, when we slam the door. Your son did it the other day. I just can't talk to you anymore, right?
Yep.
It just boom.
Dishonesty, disrespectful, discrimination, detached, dismissive. That's it. I'm done. Relationships can be messy. Are you having trouble with your personal or professional relationship? Not to worry. As a relationship therapist and coach for over 25 years, I have a lot to share. And so will my guest experts. Let's get smarter in our business and personal lives so we can be our best selves. Now, let's get on with the show. So we are on episode 5 of Mixing Business with Pleasure podcast. Thanks for joining. You're going to love this episode because we get into so many juicy things. Today I have with me Dr. Abby Medcalf, and she's a psychologist, an author, and a whole lot of other things, Tedx speaker, and so on. I'm going to get into her bio in a little bit, but I just want to give you a glimpse of what we all spoke about. First of all, it was a heck of a lot to do with what to do with conflict. We talk about how it's not actually communication that's your problem. It's something else. And, whether it's working as a leader with your teams or in your personal relationships, all of this is very applicable to you. We, of course, talk about what it really means to set a boundary in your life. And it's not to be done harshly. It's done because of love of yourself and of the other person, and why this can be so hard and what to do about it. So tune in. But let me tell you a little bit more about Abby herself. She is a relationship maven, psychologist, author, podcast host, and TEDx speaker who has helped thousands of people think differently so they can create connection, ease, and joy into their relationships. Now, her unique background is in both business and counseling, and this is why I wanted her on here, because this is what we talk about, business and pleasure. But she also brings, a really effective perspective into life struggles using humor, research, and her direct, no-nonsense style, which you're going to get a glimpse here of. She's, as I mentioned before, she is an author, and she has a #1 Amazon best-selling book called Be Happily Married, Even If Your Partner Won't Do a Thing, as well as her newly released Boundaries Made Easy book. And her podcast is called Relationships Made Easy. So with that, let's get on with the show. Abby, what would you say is the #1 reason, it could be plural, but that couples come to see you as a relationship coach, a psychologist?
I would say the #1 complaint they have is that they don't communicate. That's what I always hear. I'm sure you hear it too. Like,
Number one.
That's what people say. Number one. And that's the problem. That's a problem in our relationship, is that we don't communicate. That's what I hear. The problem, of course, is that that's wrong.
Exactly.
And that's why people get communication tools, right? We can teach them all the things, but what happens is they don't work because it's treating a symptom and not the kind of what I call the cancer, the thing that's really eating at it.
Right.
And the thing I say is really eating at it is this issue that couples have where they are in competition with each other, where they're keeping score with each other. That's really the problem. And so you can have all the greatest communication tools in the world, but if you're on opposite sides, you're not on the same team as your person, then guess what? Think of that. And why is the communication going to be good? You're going to think that someone's going to take advantage of you. You're going to, they're out to win, but I want to win, and that's what we get into. So of course, communication breaks down.
Yeah, no, very well explained. Because that sort of starts a spiral of other bad behaviors, right? And the first one that comes to my mind is if you're opponents now, rather than being on the same team, that means you're always trying to overwit your other person, or come up with like some sort of strategic attack. So when they're speaking to you, you're not actively listening to them. You're in your mind, like planning the attack, or, often too is being like consumed with the hurt that happened in the past.
Yes. So you're full of a rebuttal. And I do want to say, like, the ways I see keeping score or the competition factor show up are when we say things like, it's your turn to put away the dishes, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or, you haven't done this. I've done this list. Where's your list? Where we're comparing all the time what we do versus what our partner does. Or I had this very recently. I had a couple I was working with, and she got promoted, and she was going to be taking a really actually great promotion, big job in Europe. She's going to be traveling a lot. And his reaction in session, she saved it for session because she was so excited. Like,
Smart
she just
woman.
found out that day.
Smart woman.
And she was so excited to share it. And he said, great, I guess I'll be home taking care of the kids. So not happy for her, sees it as, again, we're not a shared team. We're not like your win is my win. But what does that mean for me? I'm going to lose if you get stuff. And that, you spent money on Tuesday, so I get to spend money on Wednesday, or I took Sophie to softball practice on Monday, so you have to take Jack to piano on Friday. Like, we keep score all the time. We are competing for time, for resources, for money all the time. And the thing I try to really get people to understand is that you are a shared battery with your partner. So anything that drains your partner drains you. And like this idea, when I hear people say, well, she has to pull her weight, or, he has to take these things off my plate. The thing I say over and over is, it's a shared plate.
Right.
Your partner can't take something off your plate. They can't. It is a shared plate. So if they're really drained, so let's say, and this is common, let's say this woman that I just mentioned, she's got her big promotion, right? She's away, let's say, for a week overseas. She's exhausted. I used to be the one flying around in my marriage. So, you're exhausted. They're not vacations. You're exhausted. You're flying. You're going to meetings. You have jet lag. But meanwhile, right, hubby's at home. He's working too. And he's trying to take care of the kids and the house and all the things. And then she gets back. And he's like, oh, take the kids. I'm done. I'm burnt. Like, now I need my time. And it's like, wait a minute.
Right.
She wasn't on vacation.
No.
Like, so the answer to that is, what I tell couples is, I want you to always focus on adding resources from outside the couple. Because again, you're a shared battery. So if your partner's drained, you're drained. It's not, they can't take it. Or to decide what can come off the collective plate. So in this instance, what I said to this couple, I was predicting, because this is exactly, and it's already happened. She's already been on business trips. It's already happened many times. And I said, so instead of, you, hubby, being home, taking care of the kids and working, get help for that week. Figure out who could bring over meals. Could somebody carpool the kids all week to school? Could you like bring things in from, and if you don't have money, you can still barter and do other things with other people. So,
right.
but, or think that week, you know what, this week, Jimmy's not going to, piano practice.
Exactly.
We have too much going on this week. We're going to take things off the plate. And I suggest doing both, by the way.
Yeah.
But it is so fascinating to me how little people think of this. They don't. They're thinking, no, you just have to do it, and I just have to do it. And then again, we're comparing our lists, but I did all this and I was flying and I did this. And trust me, I have been there. Like I've been the one keeping score. I don't want to, I think we all
have. We all have.
Right? It's so hard not to, but it really does break down the relationship. And there's a lot of choices you need to make. So if your partner has a win and good things are happening, you've got to remember that means good things for you. They're coming in, abundance is coming in. And if your partner is drained, it means you're going to be drained. If your partner, so there's no me problem or you problem. And that happens a lot in couples too, where they try to split up, well, you just need to do X, Y, Z, that's not on me. It's not that way. If your partner has anything going on, that's affecting you. So because they're drained. So, or they're upset or they're overwhelmed or whatever it is. And what I find in these instances a lot is that, maybe a wife is overwhelmed, let's say in a typical relationship, right?
Yeah.
And the spouse has given lots of good ideas. He's given her tons of good ideas for how to fix her overwhelm, right? Mm-hmm. And she's not doing them, or she can't do them, or she resents being told that she's somehow doing it wrong. The fact that she can't do everything perfectly, right?
Right.
None of us like this. And then I see that. And then the husband goes, well, I tried, so I'm done. I'm not going to, right? Because they're missing the point completely.
It's so typical. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You see this a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah, like not even to say it's like, I know I don't want to sound stereotypical either. Like neither of us want to. We're both women kind of speaking from our perspectives, but like quite honestly, that reaction that you gave to me right now, like that even happened between my son and I, who's like, he's 21, and it was like over something really silly, like, okay, so I have some crypto, and he helped me, do the investment. And I asked him a simple thing, on my phone about how to like interpret something or whatever. And he gives me a really quick answer. And then I said, no, that doesn't make sense to me. He's like, well, then I can't help you.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but it's like, it's so common, it's sort of like, let's have patience, like, but
yes.
Yeah, I love these solutions. It's so, and it comes with experience, right, Abby? Like it's not from a textbook that we read. It's sort of seeing these things in the room. And it doesn't mean it's easy, but it's what we're asking is to try to take a different perspective. And I love what you said about the shared plate. That makes so much sense. It's for the greater good. It's for the greater good of this household. And I want to bring in, maybe not now, but later, and this is why I call it mixing business with pleasure, meaning like I want to bring how this also is very obvious in the business sense. Maybe I will right now, and then I'll
go.
I'll come back.
Go for it right now.
Like, think of it in the boardroom, or think of it like as somebody running a team. Mm-hmm. It's for the greater good of a company. So if we're going to see something in one of our employees or partners that is, like impinging on making any sort of progress or whatever, someone's sort of slacking, like, I mean, sure, like we might point it out, like maybe, communicate how you feel in the moment, and then call in the forces, right? Like hire more, whatever, or can we hire a substitute in the time that the slack is happening, or like, or take something off somebody else's plate. Like you have to first communicate it, and then sort of like, okay, well, what's the solution here? Um, I see that, and also maybe sharing ideas on a team.
Mhm.
Um, it's if you share like a certain idea that is like, you could be very like a scarcity mindset and say, well,
Mhm.
I don't want to share that, or share that part of me, or whatever it is. Share my that like doing another task. I don't want to do more. But like, if you're sharing that idea, again, it's for the greater good of the company. It's not like somebody else is going to take your idea and run away with it. And by sharing and giving,
Mhm.
you create like abundance mindset, like more things are coming back to you. Like, I think that's the way, because then it becomes like tit for tat, right? Like
Right.
it doesn't, it's it's not good for anybody. It's sort of like, maybe I'm speaking a little bit here of like killing it with kindness, but I also want to kind of bring that into the equation where, we just want to do like the good thing, or what's good. um, I don't know if
Well,
that.
we call that right action, right? Like in
Okay.
Buddhism, say you're taking right action. And I think, and I will say this, at work or even at home, you might get taken advantage of. Somebody might steal your idea. I've been working in companies for many years. Um, I'm an organizational psychologist by training, that's what my PhD is actually in. And so I've done this for years, and it's very true that they might. But any business that's run by fear, and that could be the business of a family, that could be the business of whatever. If you're run by fear, you're pretty screwed.
Yeah.
And so, it's even happened just in my online business. I have a large online business, and I give away everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's free. I give it away. It's given away on my podcast. It's given away everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much free information. It's not funny. I just give it.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it was, oh my God, but what if people take this and make it their own? I'm like, I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to not give it because I'm afraid of the few people who will rip me off. Because I know
Exactly.
how many people will get it. And sure enough, my business, I've made more and more money. It's grown and grown and grown
Yeah.
from that mindset. And even it's funny, we'll talk about my books later, I'm sure, but
Hmm.
my books, if you wanted to, everything that's in my books that people pay money for is for free somewhere on my podcast. If you wanted to
Yes.
take the time and do a keyword search on my website, and I'm happy about that. I have
Yeah.
no issue with that. I'm like, yes, here it is.
Yeah.
But if you want it all in one place,
Yeah. Yes.
wrapped up in a nice little orderly fashion for you, then you pay for that, right?
Yeah.
But I want to make, again, and I'm not afraid. So, because people said, well, if you give it away, what are you going to put in your book? I'm like, people will buy the book, and they do, like gangbusters.
Yeah.
They buy my books because not everybody wants to go searching.
No.
Most people would, and even when they've heard it that way, they're thinking, or some people just want to support me.
Yeah.
They're like, yes, you gave me all this information for free. I bought your book because I was trying to support you. I bought a mug from your website.
Yeah.
Because I want to support you. Thank you. And that is a thing that you have to remember,
Yeah.
that when you're run by fear, right? All that stays closed in. And I'll tell you two things I quote a lot from the research around our brains, right?
Yeah.
This happens in business and at home.
Yeah.
So one is the work of Timothy Wilson. He wrote an amazing book called Strangers to Ourselves. Anyway, he's a famous researcher, and Malcolm Gladwell quotes him a lot now. So he's
Mm.
gotten his due, because
Hmm.
great authors are quoting him. But in his research, they found that our conscious brains process information at a rate of 40 bits per second,
Yes.
while our subconscious brain processes information at a rate of 11 million bits per second. So people don't hear what you say, they hear what you mean. So if you're in a meeting, and everyone's been in a meeting, everyone's been at work, and someone comes in and they're full of crap, but they're saying all the right things. They're saying everything correctly, and you are not believing a word. And you're like, this guy's full of crap. Like, I don't know what, I just don't like this person. I don't know why, but they're saying everything correctly.
Hmm.
It's because that 11 million bits gets picked up. You're picking up something real. You are.
Hmm.
Sometimes you're just paranoid and crazy, but most of the time,
No.
yes, you're picking up. And so think of that. So if I'm in a meeting and my agenda with my team, and my agenda is like, I'm not going to share something because I don't want someone to steal it. And I think everyone here's competition and I'm just looking for my space to step over. People are going to pick up on that. They're going to know. Same thing at home when you're with your partner, right? If you're like, they're going to take advantage of me. So I'm not going to say I love you first, or I'm not going to do this because they're going to do that. And when you're doing that, that energy gets picked up by the other person.
Yeah.
And so the most typical way I find this is that I'll give, let's say in a couple, I'll give someone a great tool and I'll go, here you go, start doing this, start using this at home. And they go use it, right? But in the back of their mind, they're thinking this isn't going to work. Our problems have been going on so long. It's never, nothing quick and easy is going to fix it. Or, we can't change because my partner won't change. Or, right? Like there's something that's going on. So they use the tool. They use it, but there's that, I call it the wobble. That's that 11 million bits going out. Like I'm using this, but like how long? Let's see. Right. And so what happens is their partner picks up on the wobble. Like, so let's say the man, he's thinking, well, she's saying nice things to me, but there's something off. It's not conscious that you think these things, it's subconsciously.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm just not going to do anything different. I'm going to see how long this lasts. Is there something off? And then she tries the new tool for a week and then he doesn't change. So she throws up her hands and goes, see, it doesn't work. And she comes back to session and says, Abby, a tool didn't work. He didn't do a thing. And I'm like, yeah, because you were waiting for him to do something. There was a string attached and he picked that up. Or people will say to me, well, how long do I have to do this? It's like, as soon as you ask that question, the 11 million bits are immediately out the other way. So, right, you're not in abundance. You're not in, this is going to work. You're not even thinking it's going to work. If you're asking, if you're sure it's working, you're not asking how long do I have to do this?
Right.
So if you have complete buy-in at work with whatever it is, you're not thinking. And so that's what I'm talking about. So it's not communication. Yes, we're all saying things. It's what's under the communication. It's again, this feeling that I'm competing with you.
Yes.
That has it not working.
Yes.
So you can have every great tool in the book, but if you don't have that piece, if you don't go in wholeheartedly, if you don't go in full, like this is going to work. And this is whether it works or not, this is what I'm doing because this is who I am.
Right.
This is who I am as a human. I'm kind. I'm giving. I'm thoughtful. And if you go in though with, they're going to take advantage of me.
Yeah.
Then probably what will happen. And I'll tell you this, and that's because of another part of the brain that we talk about a lot. And I've talked about in my books and on the podcast called your reticular activating system, your RAS for short, which is really a filter between your conscious and your subconscious. So when you think of things consciously, the RAS, which is part of your brain, it's part of your physical brain, sends this as a message to your subconscious to look for that thing. So the easiest example I always give is if you've ever thought of buying a new car, as soon as you think gray BMW, that's all you see on the road. All you see are like gray BMW, whatever, silver Nissan Pathfinders. That's all you will see.
Right.
Because consciously you thought of something, this car, it sent it as an instruction, an order to your subconscious to look for that thing because the brain is so efficient and so economical. And you'll find it everywhere all of a sudden. Every time I was pregnant, all I saw was pregnant women. I can't tell you the last time I saw a pregnant woman. I can't even, because it's not in my brain anymore, right?
No.
So how this shows up. So now I think everyone's going to take advantage of me at work. And guess what? That's what I see. Because the RAS will pull that out for you and show it to you. And here is the scariest part of the RAS. Your RAS, your reticular activating system, will filter out anything that doesn't match. So if I'm thinking, so if somebody isn't taking advantage of me, is supporting me, is saying they appreciate, is whatever, my brain doesn't even, I'm Teflon for that.
Right.
And this happens at home. I'll have maybe a wife say, my husband doesn't appreciate me. And I'm in a session, the man will say to me, oh my gosh, I brought you flowers yesterday. I told you I loved breakfast this morning. He'll list, here we go, the big score again, right?
Yeah.
He'll list all the ways he's been, and she's like, well, that was just the last couple days, or that's not usual, or that, and
that's not going to last.
You're right. Because that's what the RAS, when you have these things together, you are so screwed.
Yeah.
Because you think you're seeing reality, but you're not. Reality is actually very skewed by what you believe. And this isn't, I think people think of things like, oh, love traction and like woo-woo stuff, but this is science. This is your brain. This is brain science. This isn't something made up or the energy of the universe or anything, although I believe in all that, but it's not what it is. It is actual science that you think you're seeing something and you are not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's where spirituality and the woo-woo meets science. Like it is all the same thing. Believe it however you want, but it is the truth. And I know when you hear that, the way you explained it, like I think a lot of people would be going, oh God, I'm screwed. Like I am completely screwed. But it doesn't have to be that way either. It's sort of like try if you just, and that's why we often say as therapists, just try focusing on the good for a while. Like just, and I always bring it back to like, how did you meet? What was so attractive about this person, at that time? Can you try just to focus on those things? And I always find it really helps too to sort of set the tone in the beginning of the session, like if it's the first session, to bring this up because it gets them into that like emotional, touchy-feely, like, yeah. And then the other person hasn't heard that compliment for a long time. And so they're kind of like taken aback and, so it sort of, it sets the tone nicely again. And it also, like you say, it takes away all the noise, all the things that you have been focused on so much lately. And going back, what I often, because you spoke about this in the book too, is like the core values. And how that sort of helps very much to set your boundaries. So boundaries, you do an excellent job in your book, Boundaries Made Easy. And so let's get into that right now because no one has explained it as well as Abby. I'm going to say this, like, honestly, when the way you explain it in the book, it's sort of like, okay, it's so easy. Yeah. Not easy to implement.
Right. But easy to understand.
Yeah.
Easier anyway. And I do want to say, I just want to, before we go there, things you just said made me remember. I think it's true when couples come to me, I remind them that you have to connect to correct. And this is true at work, and this is true at home. This is true everywhere. You have to connect to correct. So what happens is if I'm giving you the cold shoulder and I'm mad at you and I'm acting very passive aggressively and I ask you to do something, why would you do it? For what? Like, I don't feel remotely connected to you. I don't want to go out of my way for you. I don't want to live in love for you. I don't want to, nothing. I don't want to trust you. And so that when you ask that question, how did you guys meet? Where was that? And you have them focus on that. What you're doing is you're creating some connection. Now, if I say, wow, I was really hurt the other day when you said XYZ.
Yeah.
Now I feel connected to you and I care that I hurt you. I don't want to have hurt you. Yeah. I'm open to listening. Do you see the difference? But when you're just at each other, so when I do work with couples, so much of the beginning of it, and I'll say it's also true when I'm working with, I do a lot of work husband wives, like executives and their assistants. Which sometimes are two men or two women or whatever, but often a male executive, I'm afraid it just is that way, and a female. I do the same thing. I talk about like, you need to connect. You need to want to be there for each other. And all relationships, all are reciprocal.
Exactly.
That's how it is a relationship and not just a transaction.
Right.
It has to be reciprocity. And I even tell people this when they're listening to the podcast. I'm like, you should do something for me. I'm giving you free information.
Yeah.
So go, but you don't have to spend money. Go follow me on Instagram.
Exactly.
Go like a video on YouTube.
Yeah.
You can buy a journal if you want, or my book, but you don't There's a lot of ways to support me, but to just sit and like take information, do
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not,
It's, yeah.
you know,
It's
it's not healthy.
that's a definition of a parasite, like,
It really is. And you become entitled. This is
yeah,
how I get comments sometimes like, oh, you talk too long, or I get to the point or whatever. And I'm laughing. I'm like, I am giving you free information. No one is forcing you to sit and listen to this video. You
exactly.
watch this and you're complaining about it? Are you
Right.
kidding me?
I
Like,
know.
felt the need to leave an angry comment because you're angered by me? Like,
Right.
Paul, I need to give you a hug. I feel terrible that you're that easily pulled out of your by someone you don't even know who you just didn't like how long. I can't even go there with how miserable your life must be that you do that. But beyond that, there's what that does. What happens when people just get, that's how you get spoiled children and
Right.
entitled children because you keep
Yes.
giving, and you're not getting anything back. You know, they're not learning, right? The reciprocity of life. So
Mm-hmm.
they just expect more and more. We know this from the research. So
Mm-hmm.
I want everyone listening to think about that, like at work or anywhere, every relationship at home, everywhere, there's reciprocity that is different than, well, my boss pays me. That's transactional.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or my partner brings home a paycheck. That's transactional. Uh,
Right.
and there's a difference. And so to truly be in relationship is when we truly have empathy and compassion and want to really work together towards something.
Yes.
We get in the keeping score, it's very transactional. Well, you have to do this or I'm not going to do this. If I
Yes.
do this, then you should do this. You owe me because of XYZ. You need to pull your weight. That's where all that language comes from. And that's
Right.
where we have a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm really glad you brought in again the executive and the assistant, because you're right. Like any team that you're running, any leader that's listening to this, you have to bring some emotion into this. Like you have to celebrate the wins.
Mhm.
And also, yeah, support each other along the way. Like when somebody is having a bad day, like let's lift them up and bring them along. Yeah.
Yeah, my
So,
executive assistant, my assistants for me, my right hand people that I have in my life for my personal business, I treat them like gold,
mhm,
because I want, do you like this? I ask their opinion. I engage them because I've surrounded myself with brilliant people, number one, because I'm smart enough to do that,
mhm,
who have different smarts than I do, but
mhm,
but I value them. And they
mhm,
feel that I value them. And then
mhm.
they value me. They watch out for me. They watch my back. They make sure things are happening. They catch the little things that I miss, And that's what I try to explain to people.
Yes.
Same thing at home with your partner. They need to,
Yes.
like, if they're just thinking, like, oh, thank God that wasn't me and you messed up. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, how could we have that? It's like the worst, Oh,
Yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't on my watch, that you
Yeah.
dropped or whatever. It's like, no, you
No.
want to be there with them, but we forget. We
Yes.
easily forget this. And again, it becomes very transactional.
Yeah. No. Very well explained once again. And you know what? Before we go to boundaries, I just remembered one other thing, because when you were talking about that situation that you had with the woman, mentioning, oh, and I got a promotion and it calls
Yeah.
me to travel, whatever. Because this recently happened in my room as well. What if, okay, the woman there obviously didn't feel very supported by her husband, right? And w- I had the same thing going on, and she feels incredible guilt because he is sort of saying, okay, well, what about me? And maybe it's not so much, you know, picking up the kids or doing more cooking or more laundry on his part. Maybe it's just he wants more of her.
Yeah.
So how does that work when her work is, first of all, something she loves,
Hmm.
so it's more like play than work, and which I'm sure you can relate to as
Yeah.
well. You're extremely busy woman, but you do the podcast because you love it. You write I'm sure articles and things like that
Yeah.
because you love it. Again,
Yep.
all free. But your partner might be going, you don't have to do those things, or why,
Right.
like, why are you constantly working? Like,
There's the competition again. So how do you answer that? So this is really important. So there's a few things I want to mention, but the biggie is that you have to be curious, you have to lean in with love, and you have to ask questions, collaborative questions. So, and one of my favorites, just here, I'll give this to everybody right now. And I have people at work, you can do this at work with employees, or when I'm consulting, often I'll ask this at the end to key people, but you can also ask your partner. And I'll tell you, when I was on this long business trip and I had taken care of the kids and I had, arranged all the food in the freezer, and I did everything, I made sure that they had rides set up and all this other stuff, right? When I'm away, I'm calling my hubby and I'm like, hey, and Bud, and we're talking and we have some phone sex. I feel like I've been a rock star, like nobody's rock star. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and this is a true story.
Yeah.
I get home and I've learned to ask this question. Okay. And I think I heard it first from like Jack Canfield a million years ago at some talk I was at like 100 years ago, but I've used it ever since. And what you do is you ask the other person. So it could be your partner in this case. And I said to my hubby, I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, actually, you always use 1 to 6, by the way, because it makes people choose top or bottom.
Yeah. Got it.
So on a scale of 1 to 6, how am I? How did I do on this business trip? How is our connection? How am I like as a wife? Right, is really what I'm saying. And I'm expecting a 6, right? And this is always the warning, And he said 2. Oh, yeah. So in my head, now the key is, so hold on. I know, because you're like, how could you say that? Right? Because what do we usually want to say? What do you mean? And we want to list. I did this. I figured out rides. I got all their baseball uniforms cleaned. I did this. I had food in the freezer, right? Your list does not matter. So instead, you ask the second question, which is, okay, you have to swallow, right?
Exactly.
What would it take to make it a 6? And you have to get that in the positive. So not what not to do, but what to do. And I'll tell you exactly what he said to me at the time. This is in my brain. This is many years ago now, but I've never forgotten it. He said, when you come in the house, I want you to greet me before the kids, because I usually came in later. When you're planning me, I'm a big cook. Cooking is my language of love, food for people. He said, I want you to maybe check with me also about my favorite foods. He said, and I would love a foot rub. Now, I know. So, of course, I get on the phone with my girlfriend later, my wife, I call her my best friend. And I was like, can you believe this? I was so great. And I did all this stuff, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, he wants this, this, and this. And she and all her beautiful equanimity in the world, she says, well, what is he telling you? What is he telling you with those 3 things? Right?
Characterize him.
Yeah. He's telling me he feels neglected.
Yeah.
He would rather there was no food in the freezer, that they ate the pizza every night, that the kids wore stinky uniforms, that he had to figure, right? He doesn't care. I was doing all that, frankly, because those are my preferences. I feel guilty as a mom being away. I feel guilty as a wife being away. So I'm doing all this stuff really for me. It's how I like things run. I want to know the kids are taken care of. I want to know they have clean things. I don't want to know they have nutritious food. Do you know what I'm saying? I think it's for them. And I'm not saying it's not on some level, but it's mostly for me. It's my preferences, how I like things. At no point did I ask him what he would like or what he needed. Do you know what I'm saying? So he's letting me know he feels neglected.
Yeah.
Now, if I had said to him, oh, how am I doing as wife? And he said, well, I feel neglected. Oh my God. I would have had a heart attack. I would be like, what are you talking about? Right. Happens a lot. Our partners give us feedback, or our bosses or our subordinates give us feedback, and we give a list of all the reasons why they're wrong.
Right.
Rebut them. We have a rebuttal. You're wrong. And here's all the reasons why you're wrong. It is so missing the point. We get defensive, right? We get defensive and upset. The only thing, and I mean the only thing to do in that moment, is to ask what I call collaborative questions. So what you want to ask in those moments is, my favorite question is, can you tell me, and you have to ask it with true curiosity. You have to listen like you're wrong.
Yeah.
my rules are you have to listen like you're wrong, and you have to go in trying to learn something, not prove something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you have to go to learn something, not prove something. So why does my hubby feel neglected? Like that was the question. It seems like you've been feeling neglected. That's kind of what I gather. Can you tell me more about that? Like if I was doing things in general where you didn't feel neglected, what would that feel like? When I go on these business trips, I feel really torn. I do really enjoy it. Tell me more about what you need and let's talk about how we could get there together. Do you see
Mm-hmm.
the together thing? What's the example you gave with I really enjoy and he's like, you're spending too much time at work or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like, why are you you don't have to do all this.
Yeah.
Notice that for what it is. They're saying, I feel neglected. So you stop and you go, well, tell me more about that. Like for you, and really be curious. Like when I go to work or I'm writing an article instead of being here, what's happening for you? What are you thinking about? Tell me more?
Yeah.
Like what do you
Yeah.
feel when that's happening? And
Yeah.
but you cannot go in with an agenda.
Yeah.
You again learn something, not prove something. Listen well. Listen like you're wrong. What are they trying to tell you? And have empathy and compassion. Because really, right at the end of the day, my hubby's trying to tell me that he loves me and wants my time and my attention. Why am I mad about that? Your big
Mm-hmm.
problem is when they don't want your attention and they don't want your time. That's when
Mm-hmm.
you should be worried. When they
Mm-hmm.
can care less that you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
When they
Mm-hmm.
when they get happy when you're gone. Oh, thank God, house, right? That is not what you want. So you've got to figure out why. It's not about someone being right or wrong. That's the keeping score.
Totally.
It's about preferences we have. It's about if my husband wants more sex or less sex,
Mm-hmm.
it's about a preference. It doesn't mean I'm wrong to want less or more.
Yeah.
It's not about wrong. My favorite question for the sex conversation is instead of saying to someone, we're not having sex enough, or I don't like how you did this, or why don't I get blowjobs anymore, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That I always say to people, don't offer suggestions, give advice, or criticize. SAC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Never do those. And that's criticizing when you do that. So
Yeah.
instead you can ask, and the answer is to ask questions. My favorite question is, hey, what would you like to see more of in our sex life?
Mm-hmm.
What a great open question. Now,
Right.
instead of me complaining to you, like, I don't get enough sex, I'm like, hey, can I ask, and again, wait till you're connected. Do it when it's feeling good and fun. Do it when it's
Right.
cozy. Don't do it when you just had a big fight. Because it's going
Right.
to sound weird. But when things are good, just say, can I ask you something? I was just thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
What would you, if you could have anything in our sex life, what would it be?
Yeah.
And they might say, well, it's perfect the way it is. It's like, come on. I know it's not perfect. Come on. Like, come on. You get to say whatever you want. You could say that you want Ryan Gosling in the bedroom. I don't care. Like, just
Right.
let's have fun. Let's have a fun conversation about sex.
And if they say less,
they might say that. Like, what would you like to see more of in our sex life? They might say, well, less sex. And you say, no, I asked, what would you like to see more of? Not less.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me more, because with the right more, you want more sex.
Right.
See what I mean? Like it's always about, how do I get to a 6? Tell me what it would take to get to a 6.
Right.
You're always going forward, not back.
Yeah.
The answer in that 6 can't be, well, I want you to nag me less. Like, no, what do you want more? Like
more of?
Like what's in the positive?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, you see the difference?
Yeah,
and
100%.
Get rid of all the other stuff.
Yeah, remove the negative from the whole statement. Yeah. Keep it in the positive, and then I always say approach it with compassion and curiosity. And you mentioned that as well. It makes it very, very simple. And I also, which all of what you said is sort of it reminded me too. I mentioned, less about me, like stop describing yourself and describe your partner instead. So when you describe your partner, like, tell me more. What else, would you want? Like you say, asking for more. What makes it a 6?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Forward. always moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you think of that too, and I'll tell you where people have trouble, because like I'll be in session and he'll say, well, I want her to nag me so much. I'm like, all right, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
Well, just less of that. I'm like, but what do you want?
Yeah.
It takes people everyone is so into the negative and what they want that they don't know what they do want.
Yes.
Hey, that's what you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want? Tell me what you do want. Do you want, and sure enough, they'll be like, well, I want to be appreciated more.
Mm-hmm.
I want more appreciation. I want more connection. I want more fun. I want more laughing. Then I got something to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, how would I measure that I nag you less? I can still nag you? Do I have to count how many times a day? Like, and now, I nagged you 12 times yesterday. It was only 5 today. Isn't it great?
Yeah.
Like, it's not even a goal.
No.
We don't even know how to measure that. But I know how to measure if we're laughing more.
Yes.
I know how it feels when we're there. And you're immediately getting people, like when you ask them, tell me what first attracted you to this person, you're immediately going in that place. And again, I do this at work. I'll have, an executive and their assistant or something. And I'll say like, to one of them, what do you want more of in this relationship? What do you want more of? That's what I ask. And it's like, and sometimes I'll hear respect or some big word. I want more respect. I'm like, all right, well, let's talk about it. How do you know when you're respected? What things is your boss doing that you're respected?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Not what they're not doing, not what they did that wasn't respectful, but what do you want to see more of? Because people do great with a target. And stuff they're doing that isn't okay will naturally go away as they're focused on what they are doing. That's what happens. We don't have, we leave that behind and we start moving again ahead instead of back.
Right. And like, what was something I was going to say? Oh, what does respect look like for you? Right. Yeah. Because that's the other thing. And what I like with those questions again is you're teaching your partner how to express themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is not always easy.
No. And it's again, it's most people are used to the what's wrong. And that's what a lot of couples therapy and where it fails.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many couples have come to me and said, because at the end of the session, I always ask, how you feeling? They're like, well, I feel a little hope. I feel, and that's the only way they should leave my session ever is with some hope. And so, but they'll say, oh, we used to just go to couples, we fight, and then we'd be angry when we left. They'd be like worse when they left because we're living all the bad stuff, right? Without the connection.
Right.
And so there needs to be a slower go in when you want something from someone, be that at work, be that at home. You have to think about what's our connection first. And then think of and then how can you ask? Yeah. Like, as opposed to a demand, how can you ask? And then the last thing is even to think, do I need to ask? I was on someone else's podcast a little bit ago and they're a married couple. And they said, oh, just this morning we had a problem because he said something that upset her. And, she left and then she came back and she had to tell him all the things. And then he was distracted. They're trying to get the podcast together, but she's like, it's my feelings and I need to tell him. And I said, what would it have been if you had just walked in and sat on his lap, like straddled him even, like facing him and just gave him a kiss? Wouldn't that have created everything you needed? Because you were feeling dismissed. You were feeling, that's what she had. And she felt like he didn't pay attention in some way. And I was like, we don't always have to say everything we're feeling. We can often just repair it in a moment because what we're looking for is the connection. And so if you can create the connection in another way, and I'm not saying never share how you feel, of course, that's okay. But I feel like sometimes we get into this thing where we have to share every feeling. You hurt me. Here's what you did. Here's what this. And it's just not always very helpful because what happens is the other person often feels like they've been making headway, feels like, hey, we've been working on this. And then they feel like, oh, no matter what I do, it's never good enough. Yeah. No matter what I do, I'm always going to screw it up. Yeah. And then they don't want to try anymore. Yeah. So build the wins, and repair it yourself. It's always connection we're looking for with a boss, with anyone else. Yeah. If someone says, I do executive coaching in groups too. And I have a group of VPs I'm working with right now. And one of them said something really nasty, like towards me. And there was like 9 of us sitting around the table. And I stopped and I said, hey, so that was pretty nasty. Did you mean you just trying to hurt me? Like what was your agenda just then? And first of all, to speak so directly, right? Everyone got really quiet. So this room of men and me, everyone got really quiet. And he's like, I was just kidding around. You can't take a joke. And I said, so I went to the group. I said, does anybody else think he was just kidding around? Or did you get that he was mad? And of course, they all were like, oh my God, he was pissed. He didn't because I had confronted him about something.
Yeah.
And I said, but I just stayed there. It wasn't about me being right about it. I said, so tell me more. Like, is this familiar to you? Does this happen a lot in meetings? Like, hey guys, when does Joe do this a lot with you when he's unhappy? And Joe got very uncomfortable. And I said, I'm not picking on you. We're looking to bring you up.
Right.
I said, it's really important that you have some idea of how you react when you act in some way.
Yeah.
So tell me how I could have done that better. So then I took the other side. I said, how could I have done that better so you could have heard that feedback better?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he wasn't expecting this. He thinks it's just pile on Joe, right?
Right,
so
right.
I took ownership. Like, I didn't take blame. I took ownership, responsibility. Sure, certainly it's a two-way street. So I'm sure I could have done something better or different or whatever.
Yeah.
Or maybe I couldn't, but then we can talk about it. And he can feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I could. Again, I'm curious. I don't have an answer. And I said, what could I have done better? Like, tell me. And he was like, well, I don't know, just, and then he like started laughing. He goes, I guess not have said anything. Then he was laughing and he jokingly said, well, I guess if you just shut up, I'd be happier here. And he started laughing. I said, that was teasing me. That was good.
And that's a repair as well. I always see humor as a repair. Yeah.
It was a beautiful repair. And he started laughing. I said, so the reason I'm here is because you guys get into stuff, is this one of our main issues, people, and it wasn't even one of the things on the original list they gave me.
No,
because no one's really being honest.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, like, in those moments, if you can stop, be in the moment, and you can say, like, wow, that felt like a lot coming at me, instead of you were trying to hurt me and I don't appreciate you being so nasty. And that's not helping us get anywhere.
No.
But to stop and go, whoa, that did not feel good, and to be honest and say, like, what's going on? Sometimes I ask that, like, what's going on right now?
Yeah.
And the other person is like, I'm like, well, it feels like, can't you feel the energy shift with us right now? Like, are you happy with me right now? I'll say that.
Right.
Like, you love Abby right now?
Yeah.
Of course, right? They get, well, I guess I was a little annoyed. Usually you get a lot of minimization. Yeah. But then people get real. I'm like, well, all right, if I'm going to annoy you sometimes, I'm not perfect. So can we do that? Can we do that different?
Yeah.
How could you be, and we're having a conversation. And I always say everything I teach is for all relationships because all the sides, and I know. I swear the best counseling tools I didn't learn. I have a master's in counseling also. I didn't learn in counseling school. I learned, in business school.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much more that we learn about how to motivate people, how to really talk, how to get people
negotiate,
right? And so we learn those skills better than we do in counseling school.
Right.
And it's a sad state of affairs, but it's the truth.
It's so true.
It's much more effective when we think of ourselves as whole people.
Yes.
Be the same. That's the boundaries everywhere we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everywhere we go, I'm the same person. I'm kind, I'm thoughtful, I'm generous, and I'm mindful. Yeah. And I'm that way at work. I'm that way with my kids. I'm that way with my hubby. I'm that way with you. I'm that way everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's a much easier place to be, I got to tell you.
So I have a program called 25%. And the whole idea about this program is to reclaim your time back. It is you could say a time management type of program, but it's all about, getting your vision in line and aligning your goals towards that vision. So it's 3 months, and it's every week that we meet on Zoom, and it's going to help you tremendously in the sense that you are focused, like your eye is back on the ball, and people have no idea how much importance time management is in terms of attaining your goals. I mean, you need to take some steps towards those goals, and then you need to become accountable to make those behavioral changes, right? Whether that's a personal goal or a professional goal, we get it done in this program. And I definitely have clients who can validate that. So let me know if that's something you want to get into. And yeah, you know where to reach me. Now, let's get on with the show. Yeah, no, sometimes this happens in the room with us too, right? As a therapist, sometimes we'll say something or one of the partners feels like they're being picked on, for lack of a better word, right? And I know I try to be like, I don't hide that. I say it out loud, actually. I'm getting the sense now that you feel like you're being picked on, and they'll be like, yeah. And I said, I always try to say like, I'm doing it out of love. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I want to help both of you, right? And so, but I like what you said as well, is sort of like, how could I have brought up these points differently or something like
Right.
that, so you put it
that.
on them. Yeah.
Yeah. In that situation. So good. So you feel picked on. So tell me more. When you feel picked on, is it anytime you get feedback, or is it just the feedback I just gave you?
Right.
Like, tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more. And really want to hear the more, because it gives you so much information, and you can't give anyone an aha, but people can have their own aha.
Exactly.
And the only way to have their own aha is if you ask a question, not if you make a statement to them. So when they sit there and they go, oh, gosh, I think whenever I get feedback, I get a little defensive.
Exactly.
And then they had the aha. I didn't tell them. You get defensive whenever you get feedback. And then they rebut, of course, or say, no, I don't. There's, they had it. So then there's this opening, this vulnerability, this communication that's now happening. And really how I have so many, the thing people ask me a lot was like, how can I explain this to my wife? How can I explain this to my employee? Yeah. How can I explain this to my kid? Yes. Always say to them, stop explaining. Right. Stop explaining. Ask questions. Have a reciprocal conversation where you're not just, again, don't offer suggestions, give advice, or criticize. And you're criticizing when you tell someone that it's wrong that they don't have sex, or that they should respect you more, or that they should whatever. That's critical. That's being critical. You need to ask questions to find out, well, what do you think respect is? And what do they think respect is? And how do we, you know what I mean? Yes. How did they think about this? And what did you think when you did that? Does this remind you of anything? I mean, when you start to have those conversations, they're so rich. There's so much that comes out of them. And that is when people feel connected, because they feel heard. They feel seen. They feel valued. Like, oh, you're stopping to ask these questions. It is counterintuitive in a way, because I have a lot of executives who'll say to me, well, I don't have time for all that. We have to get through things quickly. And I was like, you'll get through them a lot more quickly, because your vice president won't be passive aggressive. Yeah. Or you have to fix the problem later. Yes. Or your assistant will notice all the little things because they care so much about you. And you will save time later in not having a missed appointment or whatever. Like it's penny wise and pound foolish in a way. Yes. So it's like, not every second of every day do you have to stop and do it, but most of the time, you need to stop and ask the questions instead of explaining it, especially if it's more than once. If you've already explained it, yes, guess what? Explaining it again, people aren't stupid. No, that's not the problem. Usually is that they now feel resentful and they get passive aggressive around it. That's pretty much always what happens for all of us. And so, like, you also remind me, like, since you've been talking about executives and again couples, this comes up a lot too. Well, no one says this about me at work. Like, speaking about the person that didn't like, pointing out some flaws, perhaps. Yeah. So where do you go with that then?
Yeah,
I love that. Think of it. It's a rebuttal. And And I'll just say to them, so what does that mean to you that no one said? That's what I say. So what does that mean to you that no one says it at work, but I am? Because then they have to say it. They have to either go there, well, you're wrong.
Right.
And then you can stop and go, well, it's how I'm feeling. So what if my feelings aren't wrong?
Yeah. Right.
I'm not saying maybe what let's get to the bottom of that together.
Yeah. 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 Let's talk this through.
Or I'll ask them sometimes if they do it in session, I'll say to whoever said that, and who's more important to you? Your partner or your coworker? Maybe it's a coworker. I don't know. But usually they say, well, my partner, my person. I'm like, so why did you rebut with work doesn't? Like, what does that matter here?
What does that have to do with this conversation?
What does that have to do with this conversation?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, do you also have sex with this coworker? That's the other thing I've asked. I'm like, well, do you guys have sex? I'll do that to really show them like, this is a very different relationship with different expectations and different boundaries. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, don't, and I'll just say to them, sounds like you're trying to rebut what your partner's saying. Like, that's what you're doing when you say that. Do you realize that? What do you do instead with what I've taught you? Ask instead of that response. Do you see that going anywhere? Do you see now going, oh, you're right, I'm wrong, I shouldn't feel this way, I'm going to just be happy now? Is that how you see this go? And they usually laugh. They're like, oh, okay. And I'm like, all right, let's try it again.
Exactly.
And I sort of do that. But that is, it's always about not allowing the red herring. It's a red herring, right? They're throwing something to the side, hoping you'll chase it. Work, they don't, they're and it's like, no, let's stay right here.
Yeah.
Let's just stay right here. Yeah. Well, I want you to nag me less. It's like, no. I asked, what do you want?
Right.
Not what you don't want.
That's like bringing in the past all the time too. Another great, tactic that couples do is bringing all the past resentments and going back there over and over again. And one thing that I'll mention too is that, like, I mean, what you were sort of talking about there as well is, bringing things up in the moment, I think is quite important. Like, if it bothers you, I mean, you should bring it up in the moment, because I've seen this over time too, that it just builds up a wall of resentment that's impassable after years and years and years of not saying or speaking your feelings at the time where you're hurt. Like when you said, oh, you know what, that kind of actually hurt. That didn't feel so good when you said that. But like I said to couples, I get it that we don't always have time on our sides. Like literally, your partner could have hurt you as you were walking out the door to work, or they were walking out, or whatever. And you can't really talk it out in the moment. What I've sort of mentioned I kind of use a scale of 1 to 10, but now I like what you said about the 1 to 6, and just establish some sort of system where, that was like a 2, what you said right there. I know we don't have time to talk about it now, but can we just make time later? Or maybe they have, what the Gottmans call is a State of the Union address, like once a week, they sort of like meet, some good connection time, an hour and a half of good connection time, whatever that might look like. And then they can bring up these little things in that moment, because I really think that's super harmful for the couple to just, put this off. I mean, it just becomes a never ending, perpetual problem if you constantly just sort of, oh, we'll talk about that later, or someone's conflict avoidant, right? I mean, this happens all the time.
Most people are conflict. I do it slightly differently, because I actually don't usually like them to do it in the moment, because I find that people are reacting in the moment. If something upsets you, you're reacting. Yeah. And so also I tell people, if you're feeling anger or resentment or frustration with what your partner said or what your boss said or whoever, those are top emotions. That's not actually how you feel. That's a reaction. So you're entitled to your feelings, but not your reactions. If my reaction is to hit you because I don't like what you said, I don't have a right to that.
No.
You have a right to my true feelings. And most people can't get to their true feelings yet. Usually people are feeling hurt, abandoned, rejected, sad, overwhelmed. If you're able to get there immediately like, wow, that really hurt. Like I was, because I didn't take it personally. I'm getting paid. I know how to do this, right?
Right, right.
With my husband in a moment, I might have felt very differently,
Mm-hmm.
So I have a little different take on that. The thing is that I do say to come back, but the problem is again, you have to connect to correct.
Yeah,
So you come back when you guys are connected, but then people are like, oh, but it's going so well. I don't want to bring up this thing.
exactly.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. People have to get past that. The best time to bring up anything is when things are good. But
Mm-hmm.
I also do find again, like, can your partner, like, even when you bring it up, instead of saying, wow, it really hurt me the other day when you said X, I would ask them, like, hey, the other day as you were leaving and we had that exchange, I didn't find it so great. Like, what did you think about that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Again, a question
Yeah.
instead of saying I was really hurt and you did this and this is why and I don't like
Mm-hmm.
it. It
Mm-hmm.
just puts people, I've never seen it work really. I just haven't.
Yeah.
Like I don't see it working without a therapist in the room. I think people get very defensive, but when you ask them a question like what was that? And then maybe go to, yeah, my feelings were kind of hurt actually. I had a hard time.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, if my hubby ever said as I'm walking out the door, hey, that was a 6, but we'll talk about it later.
That's what
I
some
would
people say
kill him.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we'll talk about it right now because I will be freaking out about it all day. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to talk about it later. If it's that bad, we have to talk. Like, I don't want to hear it right now. Like, if
See,
we don't have time to talk, I don't want to hear it for me.
yeah, see, and maybe like it's not about being emotionally intelligent, but like I come from the point where like you're flawed, I'm flawed. We are constantly probably, not intentionally hurting each other.
Right.
And you know what? It's not a big deal. Like, it's like honestly, like, I think I want to just remind couples too, is sort of like these little misunderstandings because that's what they are, or someone's having a bad day and, kind of gets you involved with it or whatever, rather than keeping it to themselves. I mean, just understand that you're both humans and, it will be okay. Like that's also kind of some emotional regulation on your part, right? It's sort of,
Yes.
yeah, they're like, if the 6 bothers you that much, then maybe, we need to work on that because
Mhm. Yeah, it's a trigger for you or something else.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I agree wholeheartedly. I just don't think most people are there
yeah,
when, and so I always try to give people things like when you're upset, do A or B or C. And that's why I preach mindfulness constantly. Because
yes,
if
I
you're,
know.
I know, I don't shut up about it
Yeah,
because that is the answer. If you're mindful in that moment, if you're, my hubby's leaving the house and he says something a little snide, like, well, I guess I'll move the cars then because, you don't have time,
yeah,
or whatever, right? Maybe he asked me something and I was like, oh, because I wasn't paying attention.
yeah,
And then he has that response. I'm going to stop, like, hopefully, if I'm mindful, because he's not being mindful,
mm-hmm.
because if he was mindful, he would have said, hey, wait, I was asking you something. Can I get your attention? I really
Yes,
need your help. Could you please come out and do the car? You know what I mean?
yes, yes,
Like,
yes,
oh,
yes,
I'm sorry. I was distracted, right?
right.
But if he's not mindful, at least I can be in that moment and go like, oh my God, poor baby. I hope he's okay. And then I might go out to the car and like, are you okay? Did I screw up?
Right.
I didn't screw up.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was distracted. And then, you can see them coming back because
yeah,
everybody wants to connect. Everyone's trying to connect. They're not trying not to. So you can be there in that lighter way, right?
yeah. No, no, no. I think you bring up a good point. It like, and I mean, and I think this is why sometimes couples can feel very, it's a never ending journey of difficulty, right? Because we're expecting them to be like enlightened,
Yeah.
souls, right? Who just manage their, but that's not the end goal. It's sort of like, can we just get a little bit better, you
Yeah.
know, every week or something like that? Or let's try this week. It's always like, being willing to try it differently or willing, I mean, but, again, what we're saying here, it's not like to simplify it, it's ask more questions rather
Yeah.
than make more statements.
Yep.
Describe your partner rather than yourself,
Mhm.
or be inquisitive about your partner. And Yeah. And I mean, like, remind yourselves that you got together, probably because you had aligned values and core beliefs, perhaps. And like, can we remind ourselves of those? And simple repair things like humor can be amazing.
Mhm.
Um, but we're kind of running, to the
It's
hour
okay.
right now.
I think this has been good though. I think we're really, giving people like this.
Exactly. And like you do such a great job of describing boundaries and standards and distinguishing the two like in your book, and you do have a lot of free resources like even for the book on your website. So I really would encourage people to go there and to follow you on social media. But let's just in case people are really hoping to know something about boundaries here before we end, why don't you give like the Cole's notes?
Just a
Yeah,
few minutes. Yeah.
yeah.
It's, first of all, boundaries are love. Boundaries are meant to keep people in, not out. Those are walls. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how you know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And boundaries are on a continuum of thin to thick. So really thin boundaries are when people, share their whole lives with you, where there's a lot of enmeshment, a lot of codependency, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And on the other end are when people are too nice and people pleasing and all that, right? That's on
Mm-hmm.
that one end. And then on the other end, boundaries that are too thick are when, we cut people off, when we slam the door. Your son did it the other day. I just can't talk to you anymore, right?
Yeah.
It just boom.
Yeah.
And what we want is for, so just people to understand that, first of all, that it's not nice to collapse your boundaries and mean to hold a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, boundaries are love. They're from curiosity, they're from clarity, they're from our standards and what we need. What I find a lot is that people collapse their boundaries. They say yes when they want to say no. And
Mm-hmm.
then they're resentful that the person even asked.
Mm-hmm.
And it is no one's job to hold your boundaries but your own. It is
Yeah.
not their job to hold your boundaries. It is your job to hold your boundaries. It's very nice when people respect our boundaries, but it's not their job. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't be mad at them for not doing what you won't even do. That's
Mm-hmm.
number one. Number two is, so we want our boundaries to stay the same no matter what other people do. So if
Yeah.
I said no to helping my sister clean up after a party on Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and then she tries to argue with me about, well, you could still do it. Why don't you drop off the kid? Why don't you do this? They try to problem solve for us when we say,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but your job isn't to be upset that she keeps asking. Your job is to be clear. Like I said no, and no is a complete sentence, and you don't have to justify or explain after that.
Yeah.
What I find is that people say they're setting boundaries, but they're not. So they'll say something like, I didn't like when you said that to me. Don't talk to me like that anymore.
Mm.
That's not a boundary.
No.
That's just how you feel. That's just
Yeah.
something you like.
Yeah.
A boundary always has teeth. It always has a response, not a consequence. You're not punishing anyone, but a response if someone doesn't hold it. So, like with the sister, maybe asking again,
Yeah.
you don't want to stay in an argument about this. You want to say, you
No.
know what? That was asked and answered. So let's move on with the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if she stays there, you'll say, I'm going to hang up or I'm going to leave or I'm going to whatever if you keep talking about this because
Yeah.
you're not respecting my boundary.
Yeah.
And that's it. Don't repeat it.
No.
Don't keep saying it. Don't say, oh, I'm sorry, but I needed to know and I just don't
Right.
understand why. No, we're done talking about it. Then you have to leave. You
Yeah.
have to walk out of the door. You
Yeah.
can't
No.
sit there and be a victim and say, oh, no one is a victim. You're not a victim.
No.
So get over it. So it's
Yeah.
no one is doing anything to you. You can't blame someone else for how they're acting. And people hate hearing this often, but it is, I am here with my Jewish mother bossiness to say that is not going to bring you a happy life to be blaming other people for how you feel.
Yeah.
It is 100% your responsibility, how you feel, your thoughts and actions.
Yeah.
All you. And
Yes.
here's the best part. It is 100% other people's responsibility, how their thoughts and reactions and feelings about something. So when you draw a boundary and they get upset, that is not your fault.
Right.
That's for them to own, not you. And by the way, the angrier someone gets when you draw a boundary is usually means the boundary is long overdue. Because of course they get angry. They like
Yeah.
you doing they ask. This sister liked you cleaning up after every party.
Right.
Of course she's going to push. So your job, you've trained people how to act with you, and now you have to retrain them. So that's on you. And you have to be consistent. Again, not with anger. I hear people, they're like, I said no. Why don't they listen? They're getting, again, resentful and angry. You don't have to do that. You can just say no. And then again, you deploy whatever the response was, the teeth. To then go like, please don't do that. And I'm going to leave if you keep bringing it up.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
It reminds
then you have to leave.
Yeah.
If they don't.
Yeah. It reminds me of like a parent or a mother's favorite line is no is a complete answer.
Yeah. No, it's a complete sentence. Right.
Yeah.
But I would say, especially women feel a real need to justify and explain why we can't do something.
Oh, I know.
And we want to give all the reasons. And I go over this in my book around all the troubleshooting and stuff, when people won't say no for an answer, when we're people pleasers, whatever. But again, that's on you. It's a skill that you need to learn. And like any other skill, you can totally learn it. It's not beyond you. So it's just having the right tools.
Yeah.
And again, my book and the free things I have on the website, I give very specifics for what to do. Here's just one right now. My favorite, I have a brother who has very different politics than I do.
Oh, yes.
And he likes to try to convince me of his politics. And what I do when we're on the phone is I say, Rob, I love you so much. There are so many things I'm excited to talk to you about. This isn't one of them.
Right.
And then I just change the subject.
Yeah.
I just start talking about, oh my God, Max hit a home run the other day in baseball. Let me tell you all about it.
Yeah.
And I just start talking.
Yeah.
And every now and then, somewhere in the conversation, he tries to go back and I go, Rob, I love you so much. Tell me how my niece is doing in, piano, I cut it off.
Yeah.
And I change the subject. I don't feel the need to slam the phone down. I don't feel the need to cut my brother off. I don't feel the need, when you cut people off, unless again, you're a victim of like violence or something.
Emotional abuse. Yeah.
Right. But otherwise, what happens when you start cutting people off or just, washing your hands is that you don't practice the skill of holding your own boundaries. The reason you cut them off is because you're afraid you won't hold your boundary. You have to trust yourself to hold your boundary. That's the only reason you would cut someone off. Yeah. You're afraid you won't say no when you need to, or you won't leave the room when you're supposed to, or that you won't, have a response. But when you just learn to cut people off, you are never practicing the skill of holding your boundaries.
Yeah.
And what will happen is you'll keep attracting people in your life who don't respect your boundaries.
Right.
You're going to keep getting it until you learn the skill, because you co-create every relationship you're in, and you've got to get that. So I'm not saying you should never cut people off. I'm saying it should be a last resort, not a first resort.
Right. Yeah.
Outside of violence, which is not most.
Yeah.
So, but that's what people do. They're like, oh, I'm unfollowing them. I'm blocking them on social. I'm not, and I'm like, wow, have you done anything else yet? But first. And it's just, and then what happens? You can't block your brother forever. You're going to see him.
Well, exactly.
A function or whatever. Yeah. So you're not even keeping your word to yourself.
Yeah.
Or your brother really knows, she blocks me for a while and then I'm back. Like, it doesn't even matter.
Right.
Or you start to feel guilty because your mom calls. Why are you and your brother fighting? You need to follow him again on Facebook, whatever. Do you know what I mean? And then you give in because you're trying to be nice.
Yeah.
Right. Or you want to avoid the conflict with your mom and you get in trouble.
Well, as you're speaking there, it's so true, though. Unfortunately, most of these times where you do need to use boundaries, it's usually with people you love. Yeah. Unfortunately, right? Like a parent, a brother, a child, a spouse.
Partners. Yep.
It's so hard, but like so valuable. What do you think? Because again, my mother brain kicked in here because I could see myself doing this as well. It's sort of like, okay, no is a complete sentence, and then they go on. No, I'm sorry you feel this way. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I can almost like
I'm horrified.
Right now, you're going, no.
My kid, and I have a 20-year-old son, by the way,
okay.
Almost 21. So I know my kids at this point are very well trained because they're 18 and 21, or almost 21. but they know, like, if they kept talking, they were going to have a consequence.
Okay.
So they knew, like, oh, I don't want my iPad taken away. So I'm going to, like, if in my house, it was asked and answered. I would say that once. So I'd say no. And then if they asked again, I would say asked and answered, meaning because they already know what the boundary is. Yeah. And a lot of times they're like, ooh, I'm sorry, and they'd like leave the room, or if they pressed, and you only have to do it a couple times, I would take away something very important to them, or they would be grounded. I mean, I had like pretty major, to me, it was a huge infraction because it's to me, it's very disrespectful. Yeah. And I'm not teaching them to respect like, I have a son. I don't want some woman saying no to him and then him trying to convince her that it's okay. Yeah. So I'm like, my children, and I don't want my daughter saying no to some guy and having her think it's okay for him to keep coming at her and not get herself out of there. Right. So like, I think of those things, I did, like, or whatever, but so I feel like I'm training these people that it's very important to be kind to other people and to be clear. Yeah. And so in my house, that was like a huge problem. If they had an attitude was not acceptable, or if they asked again, or if I say, take out the garbage, there's only one answer. Get on it right now, not later, not in a minute. And they do. They're my kids are not perfect by any means, but there's a huge respect we have for each other. And so literally my son's like, oh, you need me to take out the garbage? Sure. Like he's all over it. Yeah. All over it. And that's, how you train people. Well, I know. To interact with you, right? And really, that is the job of a parent, like guide, train, teach. Yeah. So it's disservice towards them if we don't do that. Yeah. It really is. And I don't ever want my kids to see me I want them to really see me as like a powerful woman in their life, like someone they really think is a badass kind of, Right. So I need to hold my boundaries and act that way. Yeah. And show them compassion and kindness for other people and show them how that is. Do you know what I mean? I share a lot in the podcast. My mom was a true narcissist, not like a made up one. My mom, God bless her when she was living. And I did not want to cut her off. I number one wanted I don't want my kids later to think, oh, if I don't like what mom's doing, I can cut her off. I was like, oh, no, that is never. So I took really good care of my mother at the end, like all through. I did all the things, and I had excellent boundaries with her. And believe it or not, we ended up having a really lovely relationship after years of a lot of fraughtness. When I started finally having boundaries and saying things like, you know what, I'm really uncomfortable with you talking to me that way, and then just going off in another direction. Oh, let me tell you about blah blah blah. Yeah, and she got it. Not perfectly, but she got it. And we were able to finally have some better conversations. I also have boundaries in what I shared with her. I did not share personal. I think people share so much stuff with people they shouldn't. And then get upset that the people use it against them. So my mom, I told nothing to, pretty much. I kept it very superficial. And I know a lot of people are listening going, oh my God, well, that's not a close relationship. But it actually was, because the things I did talk to her about, I found joy in, like her gardening or something. Like people would go, oh, but she really liked talking about it. I got into it with her, like, oh, what are you planting this week? Like, what are you thinking about? And oh, that must smell really good, the jasmine right now. She's like, oh yeah, it does. You know how I love it. I was like, oh yeah, I remember growing up how you love the smell of jasmine. You used to keep it. Like, there's deep, beautiful conversations there. Without me telling her, my husband and I had a fight yesterday. Yeah. Because that is not what No, I don't want her opinion, number one. And number two, anytime I got in there, she would, dissemble. Right. And sometimes she would push. She's like, how are you and Carrie? And I'm like, oh, we're good. Everything's fine. She's like, it can't always be fine. You can tell me it can't always be fine. And I was like, no, it's real good. I'll certainly let you know if it's not. And change the subject. Yeah. Yes. And I would keep a list in my phone, in my notes of things to talk. Things would come up during the week. And I would think of things to talk to my mom about. Okay. Oh, we're thinking of getting a new dog, or one of the dogs is sick and we have to put him down. I literally would put things in there that I felt like we could bond a little over. Yes. And yet wouldn't put my boundaries at risk. Right. And my soul at risk. Yes. Of feeling hurt. And I'll tell you, I'm so grateful now, because I felt very loving towards her at the end, which I never ever in a million years thought I would ever have. I have real peace in her death and life. how I was in it and how I could be and clear. And my kids got to watch all that.
Yeah.
You know how crazy Bud was. Like they're not idiots. You know, they saw it.
Right.
They also saw me treat her as I would treat a stranger with compassion.
Yes. No, thanks. That was a beautiful kind of wrap up there with the boundaries and how, your analogy is perfect. So, okay. Well, guys, I think I agree. I think that was a great episode. I think we provided lots of different thoughts and ways of approaching conflict in our lives. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. I so appreciate the conversation. It's so great.
Okay. For everyone else, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. Remember that you can watch the full episode on YouTube, where I plan to hang out the most. Your feedback and suggestions for future guests are incredibly valuable to me, so please don't hesitate to post a comment. You are an integral part of this journey.